Hi guys, welcome to another episode of InvoNews podcast. This is Padma Suhail, and today I have awesome Peter Moulton with me. Peter is co-founder and CEO at Sensand. As Sensand says in its word, they put power of earth and tech into the user's hand. Welcome, Peter, to our podcast. Uh, how are you feeling? How are you?
I'm good, thanks. It's uh, 5 o'clock here, so we're starting the interview towards the end of the day, but no, going really well.
That's good to know. So, Peter, I want to know about Sensand. Uh, how Sensand is developing technologies. I was going through your website, and is Sensand only related to agriculture technology, or you guys are developing other tools which can help climate tech startups or climate change? I want to know from you about Sensand.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we started out as an agriculture technology startup. Our aim was to unify all ag tech together so it would all work in one place, and that was sensors, imagery, satellites, drones, analytics providers, any type of data or technology that you would want to use out in the real world was what we wanted to sort of work towards and integrate. So we've got two products now, and agriculture technology was our start, but as we were going through the journey, one of the things that was coming up a lot in particularly in the ag tech space was, well, what are you doing with carbon? Because a lot of the
Yeah.
actions and activities that landowners were going through, not just focusing on their productivity output, was also about their environmental stewardship and any other impact that they could be having, particularly with the new carbon credit market that was starting to come through or starting to get more prominent recently with the climate change stuff coming through. So we've got two products. One of them is block-based. It's our agriculture tech platform. That's to help you just run your operation. That could be running cattle or grain or whatever it might be. But you could also use it to run a carbon farming application or a reforestry project or something like that. So, but then once you have that, people were like, well, what are you doing with all of this data and how can you use it in carbon? So we're building and launching our second product. So on the website, you'll see we've got Blockbase and Mintly. So Mintly is our carbon trading platform. We're launching both of these products publicly next year in February or March. And the idea with Mintly is that you can take any of the carbon assets that are being traded globally, Australian carbon credit units in Australia, Vera, Gold Standard, any other voluntary or regulated asset, you'll be able to list it inside Mintly, buy, sell, and trade those, but you can link data from what you're doing in your agriculture or your land management site into that. So they're two separate products. You don't have to use both together. You can use one or the other, but they work better when you put the two of them together. So we're going to launch both of those early next year.
Oh, that's kind of very good to know. So, the Mintly is blockchain based.
That's
If
right.
I'm-
Yeah.
oh. So, why did you choose the blockchain technology? Because I came across many climate tech startups. Right now, in climate space, the blockchain is not that common like in fintech and etc. Like in fintech and in property tech. So, why blockchain in climate tech?
Well, we decided to use blockchain for our exchange because we just think that the financial services element of what can be done with blockchain is just far superior. It's really, really powerful. There's a whole range of things that you can use inside that market that just adds a lot of value. The thing that blockchain can sometimes do though is they can use that people try to use everything about it, and that doesn't always have to be the case. So for example, we're a centralized exchange for those who are into blockchain. Effectively, our platform is a commodities trading platform that uses blockchain technology, but we're not decentralized. So we are transparent and we're immutable. We can link historical and provenance information into the carbon credits that are traded, and we can help set price discovery, but we're not decentralized. So in our case, we used parts of the blockchain technology stack, but not all of it. Um, so, but we still thought it was a far better technology. Parts of our platform are Web 2, but parts of it are Web 3 as well.
Oh, that's interesting. But I generally come across criticism that blockchain is contributing more towards climate change in terms of its carbon release. Uh, of course, after the Ethereum merge, we have hopes that this problem will be solved. But how do you decrease that criticism, or how do you see that criticism, and how has this ever happened that people come to you and say that you are using blockchain technology, but blockchain technology is contributing more towards climate change? What are your views on this?
It comes up a little bit, but I think it kind of misses the point. I will say I had an issue with the idea of using Ethereum as a token layer inside the environment pre-proof of stake. And I think I had a little bit of like PTSD about this because everyone thinks that the merge was going to happen and then it gets delayed and then it gets delayed. And, until it actually happened, I wasn't sure it was really going to happen. But I mean, I'm
By the way,
being a
same.
little bit flippant, but it did happen and we knew it was eventually going to happen. But I think that proof of work chains, they have a purpose, but you don't have to use all, like, by using a part of blockchain, it's not like you're saying that all of blockchain is perfect. There's different use cases and everything. I don't think that you have to say, well, just because there's a lot of energy use in a proof of work doesn't mean we can't use something out of it. I think that kind of misses the point. We wouldn't implement a ERC20 token at least beforehand because it was a proof of work. I just think it wasn't aligned to our values. But now that they've moved over to proof of stake, I feel a lot more comfortable with it. Not necessarily that we're still going to be using Ethereum as our main token, because that's not necessarily the case, but we would be doing that if we wanted to now.
Yeah, you're totally right. I came across startups who have this kind of opinion, but I'm really happy to know that the opinions are kind of changing. You said that we cannot use all parts of it; we can use some parts of it. And after the Ethereum merge, we all are very hopeful that. Particularly, this kind of view is going to change because blockchain can really make a difference in this entire space. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't think that you have to use everything in blockchain holistically. I'm not a Bitcoin maxi, I think that you can use different parts of it to solve different parts of the problem. And that's definitely the case for us. Like we're definitely optimizing towards things where blockchain adds a huge amount of value. And I think the transparency thing in carbon is really, really important. Carbon is a commodity, but the purpose of what it is to change actions and activity that get a climate outcome. Now, there's great parts of blockchain that can help in that. It just doesn't have to be all encompassing. I actually don't think that decentralization is necessarily great when it comes to climate outcomes, because um, if you're trying to take actions in a market where there's transparency around the things that are being done, like, did this have impact? Has this been bought by people and we know who it was bought for? What was the provenance of it? KYC is sometimes required in those scenarios, and that's in conflict with things that is needing to get certain outcomes, particularly in carbon. So we think that parts of that should be applied. You shouldn't take everything. Just pick the eyes out of the best parts.
That's interesting to know. So, Sensand is the first one to employ the blockchain in climate tech space, if I'm right. Is the first
No,
startup?
I don't think we're the first. There's lots of projects that are out there um, that have tried to do things where they're tokenizing carbon on the blockchain and things like that. And there's even other projects where they're doing things to try to solve parts of the problems that can come about, like funding of climate projects or things along those sort of lines. There's a fair few projects out. There's ClimaDAO, Toucan. Um, Regrow Network, Renew, which one was it? There's quite a few, but without going into all of what those are, they solve different parts of the problems. The things that we're doing is probably more focus on institutional level of interacting with the carbon markets.
What's great than that if blockchain serves us in mitigating the risks of climate change, because they are growing day by day, and we want better world for our coming generations, don't we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
So
We've all got a role to play. We'll
yeah.
solve different parts of it, but the things that we're trying to work towards are going to be bringing the trust and the verification and the compliance side in the wholesale markets of carbon and carbon trading. That's really the area that we're going after first, rather than going after I suppose, the retail side of things. We're coming after it with a compliance and institutional lens first.
Yeah. So I will ask more questions about Sensand, but I want to know about you. Peter, tell me what inspired you to build Sensand? How did you think of it? Was there kind of an idea? And tell me all, and then we can elaborate more.
Sure. I was I'd started my own business when I was about 25 or 26 years old. It was an IT technology and services business. So we were setting up servers, networks, cloud for corporate customers, um, and that was a good business, but it was a services business. So I always knew that I wanted to be in technology, but I didn't know the type of company that I wanted to be yet. So I created that company and I ran that for around 10 years or so. But I just knew that I wanted to build something. I wanted to make a product. I didn't want to be a services installer of a product. So as I was moving through that phase and was getting towards the end of running that business, I knew that rather than migrating people to the cloud or installing servers and networks, I wanted to be the product that was getting installed. So the way that Sensand actually came about was one of my friends was an executive at a large corporate ag firm, and we were having a conversation once about, hey, can you install a network here, and could you do this and set this equipment up? And I remember thinking, yeah, I could actually do this. And I found some RFID readers, I found some networks, I found some equipment, and I was thinking, I'm going to stick all this together in a product that would talk to these 3 or 4 different things. And it's a very common story in IT. It's like I'm looking for like something like Salesforce, or I'm looking for something that can integrate these things all together and run connections between them, running it into the cloud, and it just didn't exist in agriculture. So I went and unpacked why that was the case and realized that there was a bit of a gap. And rather than taking my bat and ball and went home, I thought, well, no, I'll have a go at building it. I might have rethought it if I realized how hard a problem it is that I was trying to solve at the start. But yeah, that's how it sort of came about. It was quite organic, the process of figuring that out.
Okay, so tell me about the inspiration behind the name Sensand.
Sensand was just, well, again, it was about integrating all these different technologies. They were all in silos. So we thought to ourselves, well, I want to bring in a satellite image and I want to put a sensor in the ground, and I want another device to be activated by that. So bringing all these things together, we thought, oh, well, we were trying to sense and respond, or sense and act, or sense and notify. So we just turned it into from sense and to Sensand in one word, and we found a .com that was available, and that was it. We thought if Google can do it and misspell a word, then we can stick 2 words together. So that was how Davi and my co-founder Davi Lafurla came up and I with it, and he particularly loves his puns and wordplay and everything. So I think I'll credit him for finding that one.
Yeah, I come across many startups which have very innovative kind of names, I must say. Like I came across a gaming platform which name was Anamura, and it was also based on climate change. They were actually naming their startup in the honor of the creature Anamura, sea creature Anamura, who is in on the line of extinction. So it's kind of
Okay.
interesting. It's kind of interesting to see startups in this space which have innovative ideas, innovative names. So Peter, tell me about more about Sensand. Do you guys have in-house team, or you guys have what is right now the trend of remote working?
Yeah, we do have yeah, so we've just ticked over 30 staff at the moment. And the vast majority of them are all in Melbourne. We do have a couple of people in other areas, but when we started really growing our team, it was in the middle of COVID. We're based in Melbourne, in Australia, and the lockdowns here during COVID were pretty full on. So we grew quite quickly during that COVID phase, and just by necessity, we had to do it all remotely. So um, despite the fact that we could have hired from lots of different places, the way that our team grew was quite organic. And as a result, everybody's mostly in Melbourne, but we don't have a fixed office. We do go into a co-working space once a week so we can all work there together. And every quarter, people come into Melbourne. There's one or two people in Sydney, some people out in the more rural areas. But yeah, we're all in one place, but we all work remotely, and people get to opt in for the way that they like to work. So no one has to come into the office any day except for our quarterly catch-ups and everything. So yeah, we're a local and remote firm, I guess.
Mhm. Actually, this is the trend. We all have remote working. I guess it has facilitated to all of us that we can work
Yeah,
in any space, and we can, align two things, home with work, and it's kind of facilitating for us all. uh, Peter, you said that in COVID your team kind of grew. So the question just popped up in my mind that has COVID made us more aware as people to start to support climate tech startups and climate change, and come across and build new technologies? In what do you think that climate tech industry as a whole has grown more in COVID and has been able to come across new ideas during the COVID span?
I think that COVID hasn't directly affected the way that we think about that, but in a very direct sense. But in an abstract way, it's extremely closely related. The um, I think the climate has a certain momentum just because of the long-term impact of us impacting the planet you know, with emissions. So I think this momentum was always going to move into this particular direction, but I think COVID has really focused it because it gave us the ability to look at things a little bit more broadly. You can question a whole range of assumptions of things like where you want to set your offices up and everything, more of the practical things. But even beyond that, um, the impact of the environment and zoonotic diseases and everything has an impact on the way that humans are interacting on the planet as a whole. So we're not trying to solve anything directly with relate to COVID, but we are wanting to contribute to the solution at getting to net zero. So it's connected without being exactly direct, but it is all part of it. You need to make the world. We all want to make the world a better place. You want to leave it better than when you left it, and the area that we are wanting to contribute to that is contributing to agriculture running more efficiently, effectively, polluting less on the way through, but really enhancing the businesses and the operations of those places, make it easier to engage technology so that you can optimize for performance. But optimizing performance doesn't have to be only about making more money. It can also be about having a better impact as well. And that's on what the carbon side of things are. We can make, we think that we've got a role to play in contributing to getting to net zero by making it easy for people to implement high impact carbon projects and making it cheaper to verify, making it easier to set price discovery on high grade projects that actually do have impact. I think this is the difference between um, getting there and not, is reducing the cost of these things so that you can get further adoption of high quality carbon offsets and serving a role. Offsets aren't going to do everything, but it's got to be part of the mix. You can't just take one view on everything. Everyone's got a role to play, and we've got a part in that particular area.
You're right. We all have a part to play. And from this, I have a question that how IT companies or technology companies as a whole, in your thinking, can adopt sustainable practice to support the climate, to mitigate the risks of climate change.
Well, I think that using technology is going to be the way that we solve this. We're not going to be going back to not using technology or not producing things for people to consume, right? Like you're never going to not have a factory anymore that produces iPhones and stuff. You're like people are still going to want their technology, but we in the technology sector have a responsibility to get the technology to the point that makes it sustainable and um, achievable towards getting towards those types of outcomes, right? So if you've got people who are working in the energy sector who are trying to solve renewable energy or fusion, these types of things are going to change how much emissions are created in the first place to get energy. But then you're going to have people that can implement technology, and you touched on it at the start here. We wouldn't implement Ethereum when it was proof of work. Like that's just something that was not aligned to our values. So we work on Google Cloud. All of the energy that we consume is green energy. We would implement a proof of stake blockchain in order to run our operation. We wouldn't do it on a proof of work. But they're the things that we can do internally. I think that outside of that, there's things that we can build at a product and an implementation or a value perspective that helps other companies and other markets get to net zero as well. So I think the technology is going to be one of the ways that we get there. We need to innovate our way into net zero.
That's kind of good to know. Peter, another question came in my mind. Is a net zero practically achievable for all of us with the help of technology? What do you think?
Well, I think that net zero is achievable at a macro lens if we are collectively, if we as a society work together as industry and in policy to achieve it. So government and economies have a role in that. They set policy that gives surety to the market, and then the market, if you've got good technology to implement it, is able to work towards it. So I do think that it is achievable. I don't think that I don't think there's such a thing as any one company having a responsibility and nobody else. It's something that is a holistic thing. Like we as a race need to achieve it, and it's the role of industry, policy, and research, the R&D markets to contribute to that. And I do think that we can achieve it. I think that we're on the way to doing it. I'm hoping that we get there by 2050. But that's the task that's in front of us.
That's very, um, I am very happy that you are very hopeful in this regard, because most of the people I come across, they're like, we can achieve this, but we have this, and we can achieve this, but we have big IT companies. You are right that we are all in this together and we all have to solve this problem together too. Coming to back towards Sensand, what are your plans with Sensand? Where do you see Sensand in 5 to 6 years, or you wanna, how you wanna expand it? Tell me about that.
Sure. I'll answer that just before we leave that previous point. For the people that have the view that it might be too hard or it's unrealistic or anything along those lines, I take the view that you shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this. Like if we got to net zero by 2053 or 2061 or something like that, well, just the fact that we didn't get there doesn't mean that we shouldn't be working towards it. Like it's not a binary thing. It doesn't mean that we don't strive to do it, but just because you're not going to finish the race first doesn't mean that you're not in the race. You've still got to go through and have a crack at it. But anyway, that's my personal philosophy on that.
I
Maybe
agree with
it's
that.
not resonating across other people, but
Uh,
yeah, but with regards to Sensand over the next 5 years, so we've got some I guess, private corporate revenue and everything, but we're going to be publicly releasing next year. So we've effectively done an internal first round of funding. We'll go through and do a Series A sometime in 2023. We expect to grow reasonably quickly through that next year. You never know how things are going to go, but we really want to bring as much transparency into those carbon markets and enable as many businesses that are working on the ground to help contribute to those two outcomes. You've got to solve a market problem for the people on the ground and make it easy for the market to consume that. So we've got to roll in both of those two elements. So how far we'll go in 5 years, I really couldn't say. In startups, 1 year is 5 chapters of the story. So we'll just stay focused on the next year or two at the moment. But yeah, we think that we'll get significantly larger. Like we should probably double in size, give or take, over next year, if we do a good job of executing on the plan. So, but we'll see. You never know what 23 will throw in front of us.
Yeah, that's right. Well, actually, for your first point, I would like to say that you are completely right. We should not stop our efforts towards mitigating climate change just because it can get 2 or 3 years late, right? So I'm really impressed that you are very hopeful, and that kind of gives me hope, honestly, that we can solve this together. So, last question. Uh, do you, when you started Sensand, or do you visioned it to be a particular climate change or startup which is going to mitigate the risks of climate change? Is Sensand what you envisioned it to be, or it has changed? Or tell me about that.
Yeah, the agriculture, the ag tech platform that we envisioned is awfully close to what we wanted it to be. And I always thought that as a product and a platform would have a role in improving technology and operations on the ground. But I perhaps I didn't see the thing that was, I guess, more enlightening for me, or something that I learned along the way, was how big an impact carbon and climate would have in the story of what we're about. It was a little bit of a it was an interesting period around sort of 2017, 18. We really started noticing that agriculture companies, and not just in tech, but just ag in general, started talking a lot about carbon and climate and all of these types of things. Or maybe I just got older and I started getting a clearer understanding of these things. So maybe both were happening. But I certainly had this different perspective when, 18, 19 rolled around, when there was a realization that the area that we're in has a significant impact on what goes on in a climate sense, both from an emissions perspective, but also in climate mitigation side of things. And ag tech companies all over the place, our peers, were just all of a sudden they were plastering carbon all over their story and their pitch decks and all of this type of stuff. It was just a theme that just consistently came across. We didn't settle on what our view on was that until reasonably recently, because it just didn't feel like the right fit for us. We stayed focused on what we wanted to achieve, but there was definitely a realization that what we were doing in an agriculture tech space had impact on climate broader than what I originally thought. That was definitely new insight for me.
Nice, that's nice. Another question came in my mind. I know I said that it is last, but I am kind of enjoying our conversation. It's just that, where do you see? I was thinking about the blockchain during whole of our discussion. Where do you see the use of blockchain for climate tech startup, or particularly, I would ask Sensand. Is Sensand going to increase the use of blockchain, or also I want to know that how climate tech state is going to have more use of blockchain?
Um, Hmm. You might want to edit this question out later after you get the answer. So I think that there's a lot of companies in blockchain that have a really good, like really good intentions and are trying to add value to the, the or trying to create impact in carbon and environmental outcomes. And in some cases that they do, I do think that a lot of the projects and the um, a lot of the I do think a lot of the projects that are in blockchain that are attempting to solve problems in carbon have just missed the mark somewhat. And it's not to say that I don't respect what they're doing, and some of them are really genuinely solving problems. But when I talk to a lot of people who are in the carbon markets at the moment, and with the way that it works at the institutional level, at the policy and government level, there's some real gaps between the value that the blockchain market or the Web3 market in general is trying to create and to give to climate as a whole, and what they're actually delivering. There's a pretty significant gap. And I think that we as an industry in the Web3 side of things haven't done an amazingly good job of gaining the respect of the mature market out in that space. Now, I think it's churlish to say, oh, well, they're just doing it the old way, and, we're innovating and we're doing it a new way. I think that's excessive. I think that's oversimplistic. And the reason for that is that if you want to have real material impact in climate, you can't do it at the fringes. You need to get the big institutions on board. You need to get the banks on board, the investment banks, you need large scale capital going in to solve these problems. If you're not getting the entire world moving in one direction on this, you're not going to mitigate climate, right? It's just such a big problem, which means that you can't try to brute force your way. You can't innovate through all of that momentum. So what does that mean? Like, what do I mean by that? It might feel a bit ephemeral. I guess the thing with this is that if you've got all of these projects and they're not adhering to things like KYC, if you're not managing counterparty risk on these things, then a big corporate who's going to spend $100 million a year on carbon assets, they're not going to feel safe buying a toucan credit. That's not going to solve the impact at the scale of what they operate at. The European market is absolutely massive, and they run a cap and trade system. Australia has a nature-based system, and it's linked to our policy and our strategy as a country. New Zealand has a cap and trade system. Then you've got the voluntary markets that have their own registries where they will say, you've done these actions, I will give you carbon credits under these methodologies. All of these things need to all work together. But if you're not doing it in a way where institutional level of capital can flow through that, then you're not going to get enough movement through to get impact properly actioned. It's too big a problem. The numbers are too high. You can build one product and it might do a meaningful amount of trading volume or something in a $10 billion or a $50 billion market, but that's a drop in the ocean when it comes to climate. We need to think much bigger. We need to work at institutional level at billions of dollars of value going from emissions into abatement or sequestration activities, with that cost being high enough that the market affects change. The point of carbon is that it's a big enough stick, it's a big enough cost that you affect change. And if the cost isn't getting to the right level, and therefore impact being priced in the offsets market, then you're not going to get those prices going up in the cap and trade markets. It's a very, very tightly balanced thing, but all of these things need to work together. And I think Web3 has fallen foul of sitting a bit too on the periphery of this. You need to play with the big players in the world, not try to work completely separately. And that's a bit of a Web3 thing. We like to decentralize things. We like to take control of our own perspective. But climate is a different example of this. We need to go into that realm and bring institutional capital in, not try to disrupt them and do a new thing. It's solving a different part of the problem. I think psychologically, we've outstarted ourselves a little bit in the Web3 side of things. But I take all of this and say that I don't want all my Web3 compatriots to say that I've completely stuffed this up or anything. It's an opinion. And I think that we all have a role to play, including the other Web3 companies that have done it. It's just the approach that we've taken is a bit different.
That's very enlightening, Peter. And I completely agree with you that we have to bring the capital, although the blockchain is about decentralization, but we have to bring the capital, we have to work together. And climate is totally a different kind of niche as compared to fintech. If fintech goes decentralized by blockchain, it is different than uh, concerning or comparison with the climate change. I completely agree with that climate change is a different field when especially when it comes to its incorporation with the blockchain technology. I agree with that. Thank you
And
so
they
much.
and they can
Yeah.
play nice. They can share, in that
Mhm.
scenario. But in climate, you can't. We either get under the emissions numbers or we don't. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
something
yeah,
where you do need to collectively work together. Um, uh, I just want to add one more thing to this,
yeah.
if you don't mind, because
No.
you've touched on a point that I think about a lot. The two major registries, Gold Standard and Vera, recently put out these public consultation papers looking for insight or consultation with the market, particularly Web3, about the way that blockchains in particular interact with the registry. And I've got to say, I've got a little bit of sympathy for the registries in this. They were saying things like, well, and I'm paraphrasing for them, but some of the threads that came out, a lot of the videos and the YouTubes and so forth that came out was, hey guys, like, if you take these credits and you put them out into market, but you're putting them inside these vehicles and separating them out from the KYC process and everything, we don't know how that's being used for money laundering and all of these types of things. We really want these markets we want people to trade these. We want your innovation in, but you've got to do things a certain way so that we don't want our money to have been gotten fleeced and taken over to North Korea or something. Like, this is the sort of concerns that they were expressing. And I have a lot of sympathy for that challenge that they're facing, because the blockchain market really wants to add value to this, but there's a bit of a mismatch between that. And I think that this is an example of how we can work together to make that work a lot better. It's a sticky, challenging problem, but this is one example, I think, of how you don't have to use all of Web3 to effect value creation or affect change, e.g., climate change, going back the other way. It's something that I think an awful lot about, and I think that we all have to be in the room, and we all have to stand up and be adults together and say, okay, how do we all collectively solve this? The registries, policy, Web3, industry, we've all got a role to play. So anyway, you've got me on my high horse in this one. It's just something I think an awful lot about. So apologies, I've taken you over your time a little bit there,
No,
but
no, no.
um,
Yeah, sorry, I'm interrupting you. No, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed our conversation. I honestly first time hear this side of discussion or story, because I come across startups and they are leveraging the power of blockchain and other technologies. But they are, I must say that the way you are concerned about climate and how we can use blockchain is something kind of new for me, and new kind of information that we all have to be in this together. Uh, a single person or a single entity cannot make a change. Governments, like you said, registries have to be on board to effectively tarnish the power of blockchain that right now is kind of missing, I guess.
yeah, I think that there's a lot going on at the moment, and there's a lot of change and a lot of policy, and we hope that we can contribute meaningfully to this solution, to the overall solution. Um, but yeah, we'll know early next year when we publicly release how that all goes. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, right. That's kind of good to know. We would love to stay in touch with you. It's next year. It releases next year or next month. I kind of missed. I'm sorry.
I know early next year. Early next year. When launching just before Christmas is a really horrible idea. You're going to ruin everybody's Christmas with some bugs and stuff when you first try something or whatever. So no, it'll be first quarter next year is when
Oh,
we're planning on launching.
oh, that's kind of good to know. We would love to stay in touch with you for that.
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, hopefully we'll see. Hopefully it's well received. We'll see how we go.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Peter, for being with us. It was so enlightening, and I really enjoyed the discussion after such a long while about climate tech and climate. So we can call you for another podcast, right?
By all means. I think this is I've done one podcast that was not really a podcast. It was just a phone call that got recorded and turned into a podcast. I think this is technically my first one, so hopefully my nerves didn't show. But yeah, by all means, grab me again later.
No, you did really good, and I really enjoyed. And what I loved about our discussion is that you are really concerned, truly concerned about the climate, and you are really passionate about this topic. So I really loved that about you, Peter.
Oh, great. Well, I hope it comes through. I try not to think too much about it as I'm talking about it, but yeah.
So I'm going to end our discussion here, but we are going to stay in touch. So thank you so much, Peter. Thank you so much for being with us. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I really hope that we can do another episode with you.
Yeah, sure. Sure we'll chat next year. I'll look for it up on Spotify.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Bye.